I have been known to forget to press the recording button, so great, we're on. All right. Move this out of the way a little bit. So welcome everybody to our webinar for employed family caregivers. Our topic this month is creating a needs assessment and plan. This hour we're going to have a brief introduction of Elder Help by our Associate Executive Director Anya De La Cruz, who's joining us. We're going to go briefly over what is family caregiving, and then how and why to create the needs assessment for your loved one and you. And although we'll reserve some time at the end for Q&A, if at any point you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat box and send us an IM. I totally encourage that along the way. I love having a little bit of interactive activity during the process. So I want to introduce Anya. Anya has been with Elder Help for
almost 9 years.
Almost 9 years, great. And Anya is going to introduce our agency and what we do. And for those of you who are joining us for a repeat webinar or repeat attendees, this will be a little bit of a review for you. But for those of you who aren't familiar with who we are and what we do, Anya's the best at explaining it.
No pressure.
Thanks, Anya, for joining us.
So at Elder Help, our mission is to provide personalized services and information that help seniors remain independent and live with dignity in their own homes. So really we're serving seniors who are still living in their own homes. It could be an apartment, mobile home. We're really trying to reach out to people who are isolated to help connect them back to their communities and get them the support that they need. So again, trying to get them connected really is all about reducing the isolation that they might feel. And social isolation can really have some negative consequences on health and medical issues. So we're really trying to be there for them, connect them to support services, anything that might help them improve their health, get them to their doctors and stay active. So when you look at Elder Help, last year we served over 5,000 seniors with a budget of just about $1 million and over 425 volunteers and with a staff of 17. So as you can see, our volunteers are really the heart of what we do. We couldn't do what we do without them. They're really the ones who are on the ground helping with transportation and grocery shopping and all of those types of things. So it really does take the community to get involved. So I mentioned a couple of the things that we do, and you can see a driver in the grocery store. We have volunteers that give about a week, 1 day a week of their time to help a senior. They might be handy and can help install grab bars or help with some garden work. They might help seniors learn how to use the computer, stay connected with family who might be out of town by using Skype or Facebook. They're really our eyes and ears. If anything happens, if they're noticing that one of our clients doesn't seem right, they can report back to us, and we have degreed social workers that can step in, provide some support, some care planning, which you're going to learn to do, which will be exciting, so you can kind of see some of the techniques that we're using here to assess and develop a care plan for our own clients.
Thanks, Anya.
Yeah.
So if anybody has any specific questions for Anya right now, she's a fantastic resource regarding our programs and services that we have at Elder Help. We do serve most of San Diego County, and we are a local nonprofit organization. So for those of you who might be joining us from out of state, I do encourage you to attend our webinars because the majority of the content moving forward now is not location specific. It's resources and information for family caregivers no matter where you live. But if you are interested in learning more about our programs and services for your aging loved one who lives in San Diego, definitely go to our website, elderhelpofsandiego.org, or send me an email or call our main office line, and all that information will be on the last screen. Does anybody have any specific questions for Anya regarding Elder Help's programs and services? You can send me an IM. Oh, I see that I have a private question, private message saying, how can I get help for my mom? That's a really great question. So Anya, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so I think, certainly you could give us a call, and to Teresa's point, our services are here in San Diego, but if your loved one is out of state, you can always call us. We know sort of the broad categories of services that help people, that we can help to assist you find those resources in the community that your aging loved one does live in. So I think that really to understand the question, we'd have to know what kind of help, where is she struggling? Is it transportation? Is it help around the house? Is it more personal care, help bathing or dressing or preparing meals, those types of things? So those would be some questions that we'd want to dig into a little bit deeper so that we could really understand what type of help your mom needs, where she lives, and what services are available to her.
Yeah, and I think I'll piggyback on that, Anya, by also reiterating that in order to receive services, if your aging loved one does qualify and is in our service area, they will need to self-initiate. So, or we call it sometimes self-advocate, meaning if you think your mom or dad or your aging loved one would like to receive our services, then we need them to call and make that initial phone call to our direct line and go through the process of enrollment themselves. And that's partially to ensure that A, they want the services, and that B, when the volunteer shows up, the Elder Help volunteer shows up to provide the services, that they're going to be welcomed to provide those services. Also, I don't know if you had mentioned this, Anya, but we are a donation-based service, so all of our members who receive services pay for them on a donation basis, or sometimes it's end-of-life planning. There's a lot of creativity that can go into this. So, any other questions? That was a good one. All right, well, I think that we will take this segue. If something comes to you regarding specifically our programs and services for an aging loved one in the San Diego County area, please interrupt, do an IM, and we'll address it. One of the things that Anya was talking about, hi Anne, looks like Anne has just arrived. Perfect timing, we just got done with a quick overview of Elder Help, our agency, and the services and programs that we have here in San Diego County. And in talking about that large number of families that we served last fiscal year, we received over 3,000 phone calls from loved ones of an aging person. So that was children, that was daughters, that was sons, that was in-laws, that was neighbors. These were people who were concerned about an aging loved one and wanted to know what types of services that we provide, or for information and referral to other types of things that we don't do. So we knew that family caregivers were a particular population of people who really did need direct support and outreach. And that's why this Employee Family Caregiver Support Program was birthed from our organization about a year ago, was to address the specific needs of people who are caring for or concerned about an aging loved one, and then also potentially juggling working, raising their own children, and just life in general. So we know that family caregivers are needing our services as well. So for those of you who are on with us and can have access to your keyboard, I'm curious to know if anybody has heard of the term family caregiver. I know that there's a few people who've been on the first few webinars that we've done where we actually talk about it and talk about the need for self-identification. Is anybody familiar with the term? Love to get your feedback on that. Yes. Shirley, you say yes, you know what the term means, or yes, you are a family caregiver. Curious about that. For those who are not familiar, you are. Fantastic. A family caregiver, also called care partner, is anyone, also called carer sometimes, is anyone who provides physical, social, emotional, and or financial care to someone who is ill, disabled, or aging and requires assistance with daily life. Yeah, perfect segue, Shirley. It's important to know that even though the term is called family caregiver, there's no kinship that's required in order to qualify as this person who's caring for someone else. Shirley's saying it's for her next door neighbor who is 95. You're absolutely a family caregiver. So in the context of our webinars and our information that we have, our forms, our fillable forms and things like that, it'll constantly refer to your aging loved one or senior, but really a lot of this material also applies to people who are family caregivers for someone who is ill or disabled or a younger person. Oops, I have to go back over here. Sorry about that. So going back on what we were just talking about, how even though it's called family caregiving, in context, it is absolutely not required that you're related to the person. I think we had one more person here who was saying that they self-identify. Dawn does, yes, great. And Dawn, I'm curious who the person in your life is that you're a family caregiver or care partner with. So for the rest of you who, Dawn says, my mother who just moved in with us. Okay, so you know that you're a family caregiver when that's what's going on. For the rest of you, here's a little bit of a sort of domains of life or categories where you may be either helping someone, worrying about them, or thinking about what you're going to have to do in the future in regards to finances. Your own emotions revolving around maybe guilt about not living near someone who needs assistance or who's going to need assistance. You might be an emergency contact for an aging loved one, and that might be your aging loved one lives in the house with you like Dawn, or it could be across the country. If something were to happen to your mom or your dad and you needed to leave work to go attend to their needs, that might be the case for you. You're a long-distance caregiver. If it's affecting your personal life, if you're adjusting plans, not going on vacations, maybe not spending as much time with your kids, just go and help your mom or dad or your aging loved one, your neighbor. The other thing that I spend a whole lot of my life doing is research online. Y'all work, most of you are working at Qualcomm, so you're the computer savvy people, and in my network of people who I provide family caregiving support for, I'm the tech savvy one, which should terrify everyone who's on this webinar today. But I spend a lot of time researching services that are out of state. I'm a long distance family caregiver, and that kind of is my big role until there's a crisis scenario, in which case then I fly out to be there in person. We're doing direct outreach to you guys today and ongoing because we realize the impact that it has on your work life, and that sometimes can come in the form of just being distracted or exhausted at work. Daily activities, if you're helping somebody with grocery shopping or meal prep or their household maintenance or transportation, then you might be identifying as family caregiver. When a scenario like Dawn, when your mother's living with you, you probably do self-identify. There are different types of family caregivers, as I started to talk about. There are different scenarios. Think words that you might have heard of, like primary caregiver. If you're somebody's primary caregiver, then they do depend on you to function in their daily life. Secondary care partner or caregiver is when you support someone who's playing the primary role. So I'll give you an example within my own family. My aunt lives with my grandmother, and she assists my grandmother in her daily life and provides transportation to doctor's appointments and dialysis, helps her with the house and meal prep. And although I'm not physically present to help my grandmother in that capacity on a day-to-day basis, I support my aunt. I do research. I have finances, financial help, emotional support. That's a big one. And so I'm a secondary care partner in that particular dynamic and relationship. Then there's long distance family caregiving, which is what we just talked about, and that looks different for everybody. It could be daily phone call check-ins. It could be flying out like we talked about in a crisis scenario. There's crisis family caregiving, and that could be for somebody like your neighbor. If your neighbor falls and breaks their hip or is hospitalized suddenly, and you kind of jump into a role and it's temporary. That's called crisis family caregiving. Occasional caregiver or family caregiver is when you come to the rescue when needed, but you're part of a larger network of support people. And then the one category that no matter who you are on this phone call, on this webinar with us, that we're all going to fall into eventually is a future caregiver. Family caregiving is going to touch all of our lives in some capacity at some point, just guaranteed. So now that we've gone through some of the different scenarios and some of the different ways in which you help or may help in the future, I'm curious as to those of you who didn't respond, whether you were a family caregiver in the beginning, now do you see yourself in that role? And you could just marinate on that, or you can IM me, it's up to you. So what is it that family caregivers do? Typically, when we're talking about activities of daily living and IADLs or instrumental activities of daily living, these are categories that family caregivers provide support within that are recognized in the social services and medical communities. So I'm wondering how many of you here are familiar with these terms, ADLs or IADLs? If you want to IM and say, yes, I've heard of it, or if you've been on one of our previous webinars, you probably are familiar with it. Activities of daily living are activities that a person engages in every day which are fundamental to survival. So these are things that if you're helping someone literally eat or literally get out of bed or bathe or use the restroom, you probably know that you're a family caregiver and you're very aware of their dependency on you in order to survive. Instrumental activities of daily living, or IADLs as they're referred to, are activities that are not necessary for survival but contribute to independence. And so the social services and medical communities sort of gauge a person's level of independence based on what level of help they need in their IADLs and their ADLs. So these are important terms for you to know if you're supporting an aging loved one, because it's a tool for you to be able to advocate and talk the language and speak the language of medical professionals. In addition to ADLs and IADLs, many family caregivers often provide a myriad of social and emotional support and connection to the greater community. And although this doesn't get addressed a lot in the medical and social services community, it's very, very important to survival. As Anya was saying, social isolation leads to a myriad of health-related problems. So what we're talking about today, our topic today, is creating a needs assessment. So what is a needs assessment? Are you familiar with this term? Has anybody ever heard of it? In simplest terms, a needs assessment is the systematic gathering of information, right? Determining who needs what and at what level. For the care recipient, a traditional needs assessment helps you determine what types of assistance your loved one needs. This can be pretty straightforward and typically identifies which ADLs and IADLs your loved one requires assistance with and to what extent. It looks and functions like a spreadsheet that you can use to monitor the level of functioning of your loved one and that you can share with social services and medical professionals. Many of the assessments that you find online are modeled after the biomedical world as opposed to being more person-centered or even self-directed. And those are some terms that if you have any questions about what any of those terms that I'm using, please say something in the IM and I'll sort of unpack them a little bit. At Elder Help, we encourage you not only to consider what the physical needs of your loved one are, but also his or her psychological, social, and emotional needs, and as importantly, the person's preferences. Preferences is a big thing that we'll continue to sort of touch on today and in the future webinars. So that's sort of what a needs assessment is for the care recipient. For the carer, a caregiver assessment is defined by AARP as the systematic process, again, of gathering information about a caregiving situation to identify the specific problems, needs, strengths, and resources of the family caregiver, as well as the ability of the caregiver to contribute to the needs of the care recipient. So this is addressing the complex dynamics that exist within the relationship between the carer and the care recipient. So we've created sort of a hybrid assessment tool at ElderHelp, which addresses the unique needs of everyone involved in the care of an aging loved one, including self-care, like I just talked about. And a vital component to quality care includes a strong understanding of a person's preferences. So individualized, person-centered care creates an environment for all people involved not to only survive, but to thrive within. So let's talk about that for just a minute here. Oh, Don's saying yes in terms of insurance claims. We're going back to the IADLs and ADLs, I'm assuming you're familiar with these terms. That's excellent that you're familiar with that. So in talking about knowing what the actual physical or medical needs of your aging loved one are is extremely important, as well as knowing the needs for yourself. But then what about personal preferences? So let's give an example here. If a care recipient needs assistance with meals, all right, so let's talk about my grandma. Let's bring it back to her. She was recently hospitalized, so she's fresh on my mind right now. And for those of you who thought that you were going to attend the webinar on April 6th, that's the reason it had to be rescheduled. So let's talk about that. If a care recipient needs assistance with meals, let's say breakfast, but you don't know what time of day or what kinds of foods that they like, then you'll likely not be able to get them to eat, which may become a source of frustration, of wasted time, wasted energy, wasted money. It may create conflict and potentially could become a larger health issue due to lack of nutrition. So just identifying in your needs assessment that somebody needs assistance with eating simply isn't enough. We need to know what the person's preferences are as well, and limitations. So I'm going to show you, well, I'm going to attempt to technologically do something tricky here. I'm going to show you an example here that we're going to be providing. Can everybody see the ElderHelp's care recipient needs assessment now? Or if one person says yes, I'll know that, okay, great, thanks, Alfredo. Woo, I swapped screens. So you're all going to be receiving a downloadable, fillable form like this. And it's going to outline for you the different categories that your aging loved one may need assistance with. So we talked about the ADLs, literally bathing. You could do a yes or no in the needs assessment assistance category, excuse me. And then the details, preferences, and notes is a place where you can put details about the level of assistance they need. As importantly, are they a shower person or a bathtub person? Are they I don't like taking baths or showers, and so I put it off as long as possible kind of a person? Or like me, I have to take a shower every day. It's just one of those things. I don't camp well as a result. And if I were in a state of needing caregiving assistance, I would really want somebody to know that. So it'll go through, let's see if I can click it to the next page here. It'll go through all the things that we talked about, including walking. Some of the language that you might see in other areas, or I think it was Dawn, you said you're familiar with ADLs and IADLs. There's some kind of archaic language out there. You're going to hear words like transferring or toileting. And those kind of don't bring dignity to the person who might need assistance with that. So I use terms like using the restroom or getting out of a chair or getting out of a bed. So again, going back to what I was saying, how many of these sort of assessment tools are designed, modeled after the biomedical world and don't really take the person themselves into much consideration when talking about it. It's going to go through different IADLs, and you're going to have an opportunity to also list other ways that your loved one may need assistance or that you provide assistance for them. If anybody is identifying with any of these, using the telephone is a big one, but then also maybe using the internet might be something or using email, getting into email, communicating via Facebook or FaceTime or Skype. Those might be areas that you help someone with their IADLs. Technology is a category for sure. And then the third part of the needs assessment is going to address some of those more socio-emotional needs that we talked about. Some of the things that we address at Elder Help. Whether or not your aging loved one communicates with a friend or a relative regularly, or cares for a pet, or do they attend social activities? Do they have leisure activities at home that they like to do? My great aunt loves to knit, but she has osteoarthritis pretty badly and does need some adaptive tools to do that, and also doesn't drive. So I have Amazon deliver yarn to her. It's just something that brings her a quality of life, and I can help her with. I'm seeing somebody putting something in there. Oh, this is a great question. Okay, so Anne is asking if there are any assessment tools to help determine whether assisted living or memory care is appropriate. That's a wonderful question. And then to follow up on that, can I trust a facility director to assess and make a recommendation? I'm worried that they will recommend the more expensive memory care because they make more money on it. This is an excellent question and concern. And yes, there are assessment tools and trainings on how to interview different facilities, what to look for. I will be, at the end of the webinar, I've got a few slides with some resources that are outstanding, some websites that you can go to that have assessment tools on very specific topics such as this. This is a common one, and so I'll urge you to go to the website that is at the end of the webinar. Sorry. Also, there are resources that are in other languages, if that's something that. Thank you. You're welcome. And you're absolutely right to learn how to go about assessing certain places and to shop around. And then again, to go back to the preferences piece. In order to really shop effectively, you have to really know what the preferences are, not just the needs, not the biomedical, physical needs of your aging loved one, but what their preferences are. And that's going to really shape for you how you interview and assess different facilities and care communities, because they all have to provide a certain level of medical support by law. But then what is the culture like there? Is the culture going to be congruent with your aging loved one's personality and interests and things like that? So that's a great question, and I'm happy to follow up too with emails if you would like any additional information. So the final part for the needs assessment for the care recipient in your life, for what we have now, is going to include writing out any additional supports your loved one has expressed desire to receive. So if you've heard somebody say, yeah, I thought about maybe getting a Kindle, or what's a Kindle, or an iPad, or a tablet, or maybe they're lonely and talked about having a cat again after many years. This is a place for you to write down, or maybe home delivered meals is something that would be mutually beneficial if you're helping someone with meal prep. So this is an area for you to write that down and their preferences regarding that. And then the final category is social services or health programs that you're currently using. Are you aware of what EAP benefits? Do you know what EAP stands for? I get that one too. EAP is Employee Assistance Program benefits. And at Qualcomm specifically, you guys have some pretty nice benefits for you regarding family care leave as well as respite care. And if that's something that you would like to know more about and you don't know about, please send me an email or give me an IM here, and we'll talk to Rebecca at Q Living about getting that information to you. It's all done internally, so I don't have access to exactly where to go, but she can point you in the right direction. So now I'm going to attempt to pop out. So I hope that you guys will find this needs assessment useful, and I encourage any comments that you have regarding the functionality of it, because this is a work in progress and you are living the life of employed family caregivers, so all feedback is very welcomed. All right, here we go. We're going to go back to this. Wow. I'm assuming we're good. I'll just keep moving forward unless I hear otherwise. So we talked a little bit about how it's equally as important to understand what the needs and preferences of the care recipient is, as well as the carer. So for the carer, we're going to be going more into depth for the carer in our next webinar in May. But for a general overview, if you just think of the things that you do to care for an aging loved one, it's important that you know, what are you doing? List it out, mentally, physically, financially, or otherwise. And if you're having a problem, go back to the care recipient needs assessment that you've already filled out, so you could see how many things on that list that you're doing for your aging loved one. Also list out the things that you would like assistance with in caring for your loved one. This can include help that you receive from others in your care network, professionals, caregiver training, or online support, such as this webinar. If you think webinars are the way to go for you to learn new things, it's good for you to write that down, because there's a lot of other fantastic resources out there providing free webinars for employed family caregivers. This will be a big one that we'll unpack a little bit more in next month's webinar, is listing any responsibilities that you currently assume that you could delegate. So we often find ourselves really just taking on so much because we do care so deeply for the one that we're assisting. And there are things that technically someone else could provide assistance with, whether it's doing transportation to a medical appointment. If you don't need to advocate for the person in that medical appointment, maybe that is something, that 1 hour of time out of your day that you could delegate, or get somebody an Uber, or find a volunteer driving program like Elder Help, Senior GoGo. This is just an area where we can look close with more of a microscope next month on some of those areas. And then what are some of the barriers to receiving assistance that you can identify? This one's a little bit tricky, and this comes into some of the more psychosocial as well. It's not just the literal, such as we just don't have the funding to hire a home health care worker. Sometimes this can be, if you're familiar with scenario, which I'm very familiar with, your aging loved one doesn't want anyone else to help but you, doesn't want strangers coming into the house, doesn't want to create a new relationship with a paraprofessional like a home health care aide. So that leaves all of the responsibility and burden on your shoulders, which can have some long-term consequences. And then we're going to have a nice fillable form about other self-identified partners in the support network of you and your loved one. So these are people who, not people who you think should be helping but aren't, but people who have identified that they want to help. And maybe you haven't been able to really qualify and quantify how they can help, in what specific ways they can help. So sometimes listing it out and knowing that, you know, your brother-in-law has said that he can help, knowing where he lives proximity-wise and in what ways he might be able to help, then what his schedule and preferences are. I think this is going to be a really nice tool to help remind you that when you're feeling overwhelmed or overburdened, that there are people out there who've identified that they want to help, and you can go back to this form, because sometimes when you're in the thick of the caregiving scenario, it's easy to forget that there is help out there. So why is this important? Like, why does any of this matter? Making all these long lists and talking about what needs I have, what needs my loved one has, what my preferences are, what her preferences are. Why is any of this important? And going back to AARP, that effectively assessing and addressing caregiver needs can maintain the health and well-being of caregivers, sustain their ability to provide care, prevent or postpone nursing home placement, and produce better outcomes for the care recipient. So better outcomes for the care recipient. Again, that sounds like from the biomedical world. So the way that I sort of spin that, and you've probably seen this on the flyers for the webinars, is that what if it helps you be more effective and more joyful in the process of being a family caregiver, right? So how can you use it? We're going back to the scenario of, have you ever had somebody say to you as a family caregiver that, how can I help? I want to help. And that you feel so overwhelmed by the question that you can't come up with something in the moment. By having it all laid out and mapped out, you have a resource that you could go back to and also identify clear patterns where there's a tremendous amount of need for support, or we've got this area covered. Having it written out sometimes can help you stay organized in the juggling of all of your responsibilities. The process of gathering this detailed information as objectively as possible about your unique caregiving situation can help you identify the areas that you might be able to get help with, and also people and agencies. So if you see an area, a glaring area, and you know that there are agencies out there, you just don't know who they are, that's another area, that's another opportunity for somebody who says that they may want to help you, and maybe research is their forte, or using the computer doesn't terrify them, and that's an area where they can help you. It's also important because of the potential long-term impacts of family caregiving. Family caregiving is this beautiful dynamic that, while completely gratifying and something that many of us are honored to play the role of, can also have long-term negative consequences on the caregiver. The impacts can be financial. Some of the physical impacts you might be really well aware of, such as just the ability to injure yourself when helping somebody physically. But sometimes long-term physical effects of caregiving aren't so obvious, and that includes insomnia or just chronic stress, chronic worrying, things like that, psychologically. Socio-emotional, when it starts taking over your entire life or your personal life. These are long-term impacts of family caregiving that, again, go back to why it's important to identify the needs assessment, not just for the needs of your loved one, but for yourself as well. And going into a family caregiving scenario, typically it's important to remember that the typical family caregiving scenario is definitely a marathon, not a sprint. And sometimes when you're catapulted or thrown into this scenario, it's not sort of a slow progression of increasing needs. When you're thrown into a scenario, like Dawn, I'm not sure what the circumstances were with your mother moving into you, but that's a very significant life shift for you. It's important using these needs assessments for your loved one and for you, so you can maintain your own health and well-being for the long-term stretch. So some of the questions presented in the Family Caregiver Needs Assessment may require some time and thought. You might consider keeping a journal so you can jot down your feelings, your preferences, patterns, frustrations is a big one, to help you reflect back on your own needs to sustain your role for as long as necessary. Another thing, if you're not into journaling or using the old-fashioned written word, you could use the Notes app in your smartphone. Just little things as they come up, little things to identify that can go back and fill out those special notes and preferences category on the needs assessment for both you and your loved one. To start identifying patterns, to start identifying glaring areas of extra support needed. So Anne, this is, if you're still with us, this is a fantastic resource. So the needs assessment that I'll be sending all of you guys, you saw a version of that. And if you like the idea of having the tangibles, the list and the details, it's also something that you could share with other people. If something were to happen to you or your ability to provide care changes in any way, you have this written out and you have it listed. In fact, I'll create a fillable PDF so you can keep it on your computer because this is 2017. So I will be sure to do that. I won't just do a downloadable version. I'll do a fillable PDF. But if you like lists and you like checklists and forms and things like that, this resource is fantastic. It's caregiverslibrary.org. And as you can see, this is the top, I would say, fourth of the page of different lists. And so starting with the category of housing, then there's forms, lists, and checklists for money and insurance. The next category is physical and emotional health. The next category is planning and assessment. And then that's where you can see something kind of similar to what we've created at Elder Help, just minus the personal preferences and person-centered approach to it. Record keeping and legal matters. That's a great section for you to get kind of ducks in a row regarding paperwork, end-of-life planning, any sort of healthcare medical directives types of things. End-of-life issues is also another category on this website. So this is a resource, this website is a resource specifically for family caregivers. There's information that is disease specific if you need to educate yourself on Parkinson's disease or Alzheimer's. It's just a really good resource. So Anne, I think this is the one, yeah, this is the website that I think you'll find useful in your search for needs assessment for interviewing retirement communities and care communities. And this is another website. The Family Caregiver Alliance is a national nonprofit organization, again, specifically to help family caregivers in their journey. And they also have some really great fact and tip sheets on their website, which you can find pretty quickly. But the thing I really like about this website is that their fact and tip sheets come in Spanish, Chinese, Korean, and Vietnamese, which is a fantastic resource for people. They don't have all of their fact and tip sheets in these other languages, but there's a selection like Alzheimer's disease and caregiving is in all of the languages. Some of the broader categories, emotional health for family caregivers is in all languages. So this might be something if you're providing support for an aging loved one, let's say a parent or an in-law, and the spouse of that person is maybe the primary caregiver for that person and speaks another language as their primary language, this is something that you can download and print and give to your aging loved one and their primary care partner. Because if you're with us today, you're definitely speaking English. So finally, we have a few minutes left here at the end of the hour. I just want to, number one, thank you for your time and for being here. And secondly, encourage you to join us next month when we're going to go through in much more detail about the carer's needs assessment. So we've kind of thrown around a lot of different terms: family caregiver, care partner, carer, and care recipient. And so for the purposes of these assessment tools that we've created, we're going to have assessment tools for the carer, which is you, and the care recipient, which is your aging loved one. And next month, we're going to really start diving in a little deeper for what the needs of the carer or you are, and preferences as well. And also the needs and preferences of the other people who have self-identified on the team or self-identified on the care team with you. So maybe you don't know, you don't need to know what your neighbor who said that they can mow the lawn's work schedule is. But if you're working in collaboration, let's say with a sister or a brother or a parent who's the primary care partner, this is good information for both of you to have about your needs and your preferences. I just want to allow a few minutes now if anybody has really specific questions about family caregiving, about needs assessments, about why does it matter, any of the language that I gave out today, comments or needs for future topics. It's really open for any sort of feedback that you might have. If you have any questions for Anya while you have her here about Elder Help or about our specific programs, I realized that one of the slides got taken off, Anya, so I'm sorry. I had a nice slide up there of the 3 main programs that we have, which are Concierge Club, Seniors A Go-Go, and Home Share. If you have any questions about Concierge Club, which is our volunteer matching program, one-on-one, a volunteer with a senior, and it's really based on the unique needs of that particular individual. Seniors A Go-Go is our transportation program specifically. And Home Share is what it sounds like. Home Share. It pairs a person with room in their home with somebody who needs a place to live, and they're very unique dynamic regarding that. So if you have any questions on any of those specific programs, please use the instant messaging. I'm going to unmute everybody, so if you want to ask any questions verbally, let's see. Oops, that's how we go all. So don't say anything bad about the webinar now because I can hear everybody. Great. Don has a question. Can you recommend resources for emotional support groups? Yes, I can. In fact, I can give you a couple literal things right now. And after the webinar, I will email all of you with a link. There's a really great organization, Caregiver Coalition, here in San Diego. Don, are you in San Diego? And great, yeah, so they provide support and resources for family caregivers in the area. And very regularly, they hold resource fairs where you can go and meet with vendors of all different professions, from free legal advice to end-of-life planning to hospice care, things like that. One of the drawbacks of their resource fairs is that they often are in during the day, during the week. But I have good news. There's a resource fair for the Caregiver Coalition on Saturday, May 20th. And the reason that I know this is because I'm going to be manning the Elder Help booth representing our services that we provide for seniors. So that's a really great place to come in and also look for a local support group. If you want me to, I'll send you guys all the information for that resource fair for family caregivers. And then I think you just said regarding specifically a support group. Yes, another resource that I will send you all a link to their website for is Southern Caregiver Resource Center, SCRC. If I was really savvy, Alfredo, I would pop out to the internet and just pull up the website for you, but I don't want you guys to all fall asleep on me while I try to figure that one out. Southern Caregiver Resource Center is a free resource that provides support groups for family caregivers. And I have personally attended support groups that they've hosted as a family caregiver, not as a aging industry professional. And it is wonderful. And it's people of family caregiving scenarios that are all different. It's not disease specific. But that's another approach that you can go through. And we are going to talk more about that in next month's webinar, Don, so I hope you can join us for that. We're going to talk about the different ways you can seek out support groups. So if your aging loved one, let's say, has Alzheimer's disease or Parkinson's disease, that's one route you can go, is sort of disease specific, which can be very helpful in topically related things such as medications and support services, care, local care, things like that. But then places like Southern Caregiver Resource Center, they're general family caregiving. And so you're going to get all kinds of different scenarios. You're going to get spouses and neighbors, and topically they host all kinds of on-site and off-site support groups. So their on-site support group operates out of, you're going to have to help me with this, Ruffin Road, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, Ruffin Road in the Kearny Mesa area. Yes, in the Kearny Mesa area. I'm geographically challenged as well. But Don, I highly, highly recommend them. And I will send everybody the link to their schedule of support groups. They have them all over. So their offices are on Ruffin Road, but they have them in all parts of San Diego County. And I highly recommend them. Any other questions. That's a really great one, Dawn. I hear somebody maybe getting ready to ask a question. You're welcome.
This is Alfredo. Do you offer services for, again, my mother, she's actually a Spanish speaker, but she's at a point where she's in the process of applying for Medicare, and I'm sure she's going to need some assistance, whether from me or somebody else, in order to go through this process.
So are you asking, Alfredo, that's a great question, are you asking specifically about Spanish-speaking legal services for Medicaid and Medicare?
Yes, something to that effect. My mother, she's, I guess for a long time has wanted to be independent. She's been working. I mean, she's about to turn 78, if you can believe that. And she was recently laid off, so now she's really going to be on her own. I have offered to have her stay with us. She's kind of resisted, and so now she's at a point where she needs to, since she has no health insurance through her employer, she'll need to go through that process of applying for Medicare. So she's been calling me to help her along, but I'm not as knowledgeable on Medicare, so I'm thinking it'd be great to have somebody for her to reach out to that is a Spanish speaker and is more knowledgeable with that process.
Absolutely. Are you local, Alfredo? Are you in San Diego?
I am local. I am in San Diego.
Okay. I'll send all of you guys a link to HICAP is a good resource here locally. But there's a couple other not legal aid society, but I'll just double check. I know that one of them does provide Spanish support. And so, are you thinking of one in particular? Is it HICAP? Okay. Yeah, HICAP. It's an acronym, and I'm going to challenge you to come up with it, Anya.
Something about health insurance. Something.
Yeah. It's HICAP. And I'm going to write it down, and I'll send everybody the link to them. They're not exclusively Spanish speaking, so if this is something that you are also interested in, anybody else who's listening to this question, this is a really great, valuable community resource. And they often do have representation at these family caregiver resource fairs, resource events. It's another great place to find those legal services. If you could make it on the 20th, Alfredo, if not, you'll have a link to the Caregiver Coalition, and you can follow them on Facebook and find out when they're doing things and where it's happening. But HICAP is highly recommended.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, great questions. Anybody else have any specific? We love specific questions. If I don't have the answer, I've got this one here with me here who knows a whole lot about services in San Diego County. I hear somebody maybe wanting to ask another question. Well, it's just about noon, and I just want to thank you all for spending the time with us. I hope this was a meaningful hour for you all, and if you have any further questions or need any specific resources, please do not hesitate to contact me. Email me or call me, and I will be sending all of you not only the downloadable and fillable version of the needs assessment, but the fillable PDF in case you want to just store it in your computer. And also the links to the specific resources that we talked about here at the end. And a little bit of a brief survey for feedback regarding how you felt today with, as well as if you've got any other ideas or needs for topics in future webinars. So thank you so much for being here. I hope you all can make it next month. You'll be getting an email invitation to next month's webinar, and we just really appreciate you being here. I hope it was meaningful for you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, ladies. You have a great day.
You too.
Thank you. You too. I'm just going to mute everybody here. Actually, I'll mute myself. If you're still on and you want to ask a question, please go ahead.